I need to give you some background on why I was in this mess in the first place. A few years back, I was deep into drugs and making terrible decisions. I had racked up charges for possession, retail theft, and just generally being a complete screw-up. My life was a disaster and I was dragging everyone around me down with it. One day, while I was completely high out of my mind, I wandered into a department store. For reasons I still can't explain, I decided to steal a belt. Not something valuable, not something I even needed. Just a stupid belt. I put it on and walked right out of the store like I owned the place. Of course, I got caught immediately. A loss prevention officer spotted me and called me back into the store. I was so messed up that I actually went back in with her. She took me to this little office in the back and had me take the belt off. The loss prevention officer asked to see my identification. I told her I didn't have it on me because it was in my car. She looked annoyed but didn't seem too concerned. That's when something in my drug-addled brain told me to just get up and leave. So I did. I stood up and started walking toward the door. She called after me, telling me to wait and that I couldn't just leave. But I kept walking. She followed me, practically begging me to return. But I ignored her and got in my car and drove off. At the time I thought I was being clever. I guess it was just another stupid decision in a long line of stupid decisions. 6 months later, my wife and I were planning to move to a different state. I had been clean for a few months by then and was trying to get my life together. Before we moved, I figured I should check if there were any outstanding warrants against me. I called the sheriff's department to see if they had filed charges for that belt incident. The lady at the sheriff's department told me I had 2 active warrants. When I asked if they were for the theft, she said no, they were for misdemeanor battery. I was shocked. Battery? I never touched that woman. Not once. She was claiming I had pushed her or something, which was absolutely false. I may have been a thief and a drug user, but I wasn't violent. I called my lawyer immediately. She was familiar with my case and agreed to help me sort this out. She contacted the prosecutor and arranged for me to turn myself in before my court date. The plan was simple. I would arrive at the county jail between 3 and 4 in the morning, get processed into the system, then appear before the judge to get my bond set so I could bond out. It was mid-January in Illinois, which meant it was brutally cold. The kind of cold that cuts right through your jacket and makes your bones ache. My wife drove me to the jail around 4 in the morning. The parking lot was empty except for a few patrol cars, and the whole place looked deserted. I walked up to the entrance and rang the doorbell. After a few minutes, I heard the buzzer and pushed open the heavy door. An officer met me in the lobby, looking half asleep and clearly annoyed that someone was bothering him at this hour. The officer asked what I was doing there. I explained that I was there to turn myself in, that my lawyer had arranged it with the prosecutor, and that I had court that morning and needed to be processed first. That's when things got weird. Instead of taking me back to be booked, this guy started making excuses. He told me he didn't think I wanted to do this right now. When I asked what he meant, he said there weren't enough people there to process me properly. I pointed out that it only takes one person to do the paperwork, and he admitted that was true, but then said the floor back there was really cold, and I would be uncomfortable. I stared at him, wondering if I was hearing this correctly. He continued making up reasons why I shouldn't turn myself in. He told me I was going to be waiting for hours to get this finished, that I wouldn't be able to sleep, and that it was going to be miserable. I said that was fine because I needed to get this done before court. Then he asked if I was sure I couldn't just come back later, maybe during regular business hours. This went on for several more minutes. He kept coming up with excuse after excuse, doing everything he could to convince me to leave. Here I was, trying to do the right thing and turn myself in on a $50,000 warrant, and this officer was actively trying to talk me out of it. My wife was waiting in the car and could see through the glass doors that something strange was happening. The officer kept gesturing toward the exit and shaking his head. He suggested I go home and get some sleep, then come back when there were more people there to help me. I told him I didn't understand because this was all arranged ahead of time. He said he knew, but that I should trust him because I didn't want to do this right now. I had never seen anything like this in my life. Finally, I gave up and left. My wife asked what happened and I told her the whole bizarre conversation. She was just as confused as I was. That morning, I showed up to court on schedule. My lawyer was waiting for me outside the courtroom. She asked where I had been that morning and why I didn't turn myself in like we had planned. I explained the entire situation to her. She looked at me like I was making it up. She asked if I was serious about an officer trying to talk me out of turning myself in. I swore on my life that it was true, and that my wife had seen the whole thing through the glass doors. When we got into the courtroom, my lawyer immediately told the judge and prosecutor what had happened. Their reactions were immediate and intense. The judge asked for the officer's name. I had been smart enough to write down his name and badge number during our conversation. The prosecutor said this was completely unacceptable and that they needed to address it immediately. The supervisor was called to the courtroom right then and there. It turned out this wasn't the first time this officer had caused problems. Apparently, he had a history of being lazy and trying to avoid doing his job. The supervisor said this was the final straw and that the officer had been written up multiple times for similar behavior. About a week later, I found out the officer had been suspended. My lawyer also discovered that the battery charges were completely fabricated. The loss prevention officer had lied about me touching her, probably trying to add extra charges to make the theft seem worse. The judge said that given the circumstances and the false nature of these charges, he was dismissing the case entirely. So in the end, the lazy officer who tried to avoid doing his paperwork got suspended, and I walked away with all charges dropped. The guy who was supposed to arrest me tried so hard to avoid his job that he ended up losing it, while I got a clean slate and a fresh start. I grew up in a normal middle-class household. My mom worked as an office manager at some insurance company and made decent money. Nothing fancy, but we weren't struggling either. She was always the type who thought she was smarter than everyone else, especially when it came to money and the system. She'd brag about finding loopholes and ways to save on taxes that her co-workers were too stupid to figure out. When I turned 15, she told me she was going to help me build credit early by opening a bank account at her credit union. I didn't think much of it since I was just a kid with no job or driver's license. She explained that it would be good for my future and that she'd help me manage it until I was older. I trusted her completely because, well, she was my mom. What I didn't know was that she had made herself a joint owner on the account and was planning something way more sinister than helping me build credit. Fast forward to when I was 20. I had dropped out of college after 2 years because I couldn't get financial aid. My mom made too much money for me to qualify for help, but she refused to contribute anything toward my education. I was stuck living at home, unemployed, and desperately trying to figure out what to do with my life. My days were spent filling out job applications and sending out resumes for anything within driving distance. My car was a beat-up 1996 Ford Explorer that guzzled gas like nobody's business, 10 miles per gallon on a good day, which meant I had to be strategic about where I could even afford to drive for interviews. Then one Tuesday morning, I got a letter from the Internal Revenue Service that made my blood run cold. The envelope looked official and scary, and when I opened it, the words "unpaid taxes" jumped out at me in bold letters. My hands were shaking as I read through the angry, formal language about how cash had appeared in an account under my name and been transferred to another account without proper tax reporting. My first thought was that this had to be some kind of mistake. I barely had $20 to my name most days. What money were they talking about? I called the number on the letter, and after waiting on hold for what felt like forever, I got connected to someone who sounded like they dealt with tax cheats all day long. The agent immediately started asking me about unreported income in an account ending in some numbers I didn't recognize. They mentioned cash deposits totaling over $30,000 that had been transferred without reporting the income. I tried to explain that there had to be a mistake, that I didn't have that kind of money and didn't even have a job. The agent sounded annoyed and told me that the account was clearly in my name with my social security number. When I insisted I had no idea what account they were talking about, they seemed to think I was lying. The agent told me I needed to gather documentation and call back. This started months of the most stressful phone calls and letters I'd ever dealt with. Every few days, another piece of mail would arrive with increasingly threatening language. The IRS was convinced I was lying and trying to hide money from them. My mom was at work during most of these calls, so I was handling everything alone. She'd come home and ask how my job search was going, but I was too embarrassed and confused to tell her about the tax problem. I kept thinking it would get resolved and turn out to be some clerical error, but it kept getting worse. The letters started using words like criminal investigation and tax evasion. I was losing sleep and barely eating because I was so stressed. How could I owe taxes on money I'd never seen? After about 3 months of getting nowhere with lower level agents, I finally got transferred to someone higher up who seemed willing to actually listen to what I was saying. This senior agent looked at my file and admitted they could see why I was confused. They walked me through what they were seeing on their end. The agent explained that there was a bank account at Mountain View Credit Union that had been opened in my name when I was 15. My mother was listed as a joint owner. Large cash deposits had been made regularly, and then the money got transferred to another account in my mother's name only. My stomach dropped. Suddenly everything clicked into place. All those times my mom had bragged about being smarter than her co-workers. All her comments about stupid people who pay too much in taxes. I asked if she had been using my account to hide money from them, and the agent confirmed that this appeared to be exactly what was happening. They explained that when I was a minor, the income was attributed to my mother as my guardian. But once I turned 18, I became liable for taxes on any income in accounts under my name. I felt sick realizing that my own mother had set me up to take the fall for her tax scheme. All those years of her acting like she was helping me and looking out for my future, and she was actually using me as a shield for her illegal activity. The agent explained that since the account was in my name, I was responsible for the taxes owed according to the law. I told them I wanted the account closed immediately and wanted nothing to do with whatever my mother had been doing. The senior agent helped me understand what I needed to do to fix the situation. I had to provide written authorization for them to close the account and transfer responsibility for the back taxes to the actual person who benefited from the unreported income. I gave them my mother's full name, social security number, work address, and phone number, explaining that she was the one who opened the account and had been using it while I never saw a penny of that money. The agent walked me through the paperwork I needed to fill out and send back. Within a few weeks, I got a letter confirming that the account had been closed and the tax liability had been transferred to my mother. Then came the fun part. About a month later, my mom came home from work looking absolutely furious. She stormed into the house and slammed her purse down on the kitchen counter. She demanded to know if I had talked to the Internal Revenue Service about the bank account. I told her yes, I had talked to them about the account she opened in my name without telling me, the one that almost got me arrested for tax evasion. She got even angrier and yelled that I had no right to do that, claiming the account was for my future. I shot back that she had been using it to hide her money from the government and stick me with a tax bill. She tried to defend herself by saying I didn't understand how taxes work and that she was saving us money as a family. I told her she was trying to justify committing fraud using my identity. I told her I could have gone to jail because of what she did. She brushed off my concerns and said I was being dramatic, claiming nothing would have happened to me. I reminded her that I had gotten letters threatening criminal prosecution and spent months thinking I was going to be arrested for something I didn't even know about. She tried to make it sound like she was doing me a favor, like I was ungrateful for not appreciating her financial planning, but I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew she was caught. A few weeks later, she got her own letter from the Internal Revenue Service. She owed about $15,000 in back taxes, plus penalties and interest. Money that came directly out of her precious nest egg that she'd been building up by hiding income in my name. She came to me furious, saying she couldn't believe I had turned her into the government, and reminded me that she was my mother. I told her I couldn't believe she had committed identity theft against her own son, but here we were. She complained that I had ruined everything, and that the money was supposed to be for both of us. I explained that the money was supposed to help her avoid paying what she legally owed, and told her not to try to make this about helping me when she was perfectly willing to let me take the blame. She paid the $15,000, but she made sure I knew exactly how much it hurt her financially. She kept bringing up how I had cost her all that money and how ungrateful I was. She even threatened to write me out of her will like that was supposed to scare me. She still has no idea how the Internal Revenue Service figured out her scheme. She is convinced that some computer system randomly flagged the account, and I've never told her the truth. That secret is going with me to the grave. A year ago, I was 22, fresh out of college and living alone in a small house I'd managed to rent in my hometown. Money was tight, like really tight, and I was working 2 part-time jobs just to make ends meet. That's when an old high school acquaintance reached out to me on social media. I hadn't talked to Karen since graduation, but we'd been friendly enough back then. She messaged me asking if I knew anyone who needed a roommate because she was in a tough spot. Her relationship with her baby's father had gone south, and she needed somewhere safe to stay with her 2-year-old son. She also mentioned she had a large dog but assured me both the kid and the dog were well behaved. I felt bad for her situation. Being a single mom couldn't be easy, and I really needed help with the rent. After a few phone calls where she promised to be respectful of my space and help with household chores, I agreed to let her move in temporarily. When she showed up with 3 times more stuff than she'd mentioned, I should have seen the red flag. Boxes upon boxes of belongings, plus this massive German shepherd that immediately started sniffing around my house like he owned the place. My 1-year-old cat, Whiskers, took one look at this beast and disappeared under my bed. When she arrived, Karen thanked me and promised they would be perfect roommates. I reminded her about keeping common areas clean and checking with me before having overnight guests. She agreed and said I wouldn't even know they were there. That was a lie. Within the first week, I came home from work to find my living room couch completely shredded. The dog had apparently decided it made a great chew toy. When I confronted Karen about it, she just shrugged and said the dog did that sometimes when he was anxious. She acted like it wasn't that big of a deal. I told her the couch had cost me $800 and I was still paying it off. Instead of apologizing, she said maybe I shouldn't have such expensive furniture if I couldn't afford to replace it. I was speechless. Not only was she not apologizing, but she was somehow making it my fault. Things only got worse from there. She left dirty dishes in the sink for days, threw trash on the floor instead of in the garbage can, and let her toddler run wild through the house. My poor cat stopped coming out of hiding entirely because the dog would chase him every chance he got, and Karen would just laugh it off. But the worst part was her ex-boyfriend situation. Despite our agreement about no overnight guests, I started coming home to find this guy's car in my driveway. The first time I brought it up, she made excuses about how he just came to pick up some of his son's things, and it got late. She claimed she couldn't send him driving home when he was tired. I reminded her that we had agreed on no overnight guests and that this was my house. I told her I wasn't comfortable with strangers staying there. She got defensive and said he wasn't a stranger because he was her baby's father. She insisted he was really sweet once you got to know him, but she kept inviting him over anyway. I'd wake up in the morning to find him making breakfast in my kitchen like he lived there. When I tried to address it with Karen, she'd get defensive and make me feel like I was being unreasonable. The breaking point came after about 5 months. I was exhausted from working extra hours to try to replace my destroyed furniture. My cat was basically a prisoner in his own home, and I couldn't relax in my own house. I finally worked up the courage to tell Karen she needed to find somewhere else to live. I sat her down and told her this arrangement wasn't working out. I said I thought it was best if she started looking for another place. She acted shocked and asked if I was serious. She demanded to know what was wrong after everything she had done for me. I asked her what exactly she had done for me since she had destroyed my furniture, didn't clean up after herself, and kept bringing her ex over when I had asked her not to. That's when she completely lost it. The sweet, grateful woman who'd begged me for help disappeared, and I saw who she really was underneath. She started screaming that I was just jealous because she had a family and I was alone with my stupid cat. She said no wonder I couldn't keep a boyfriend with my anxiety issues and my crazy mother. She knew my mom struggled with alcoholism because I confided in her during one of our late-night conversations when I thought we were becoming friends. She knew I had anxiety problems that I was getting help for. She threw all of it back in my face like weapons. But she wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, while she was supposed to be moving out, she started spreading rumors around town. She told people I was a terrible person who kicked out a single mom and her baby. She made up stories about me being abusive to her child and claimed I was jealous of her relationship. In a small town, word travels fast, and suddenly I was getting dirty looks at the grocery store from people I'd known my whole life. The day she finally moved out, I thought I was free. I changed my locks, fumigated to get rid of the fleas her dog had brought in, and started trying to put my life back together. My cat slowly started coming out of hiding, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe in my own home. About a month later, I was sitting in the Job and Family Services office, applying for food stamps because money was still incredibly tight. My phone rang, and I saw Karen's name on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. She asked if she could use my address for her insurance because she would save a bunch of money on her premiums. I asked if she was kidding me. She said it wasn't a big deal and offered to give me $50 for it. I told her that was insurance fraud and I wasn't going to commit a crime so she could save money. She called me dramatic and said it was just an address. I hung up on her, but I was furious. After everything she'd put me through, she had the nerve to ask me to break the law for her. I sat there in that waiting room thinking about all the horrible things she'd said about me, all the lies she'd spread, and how she'd made me feel like a prisoner in my own home. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called the fraud hotline. The representative was very interested in what I had to tell them. Apparently, using someone else's address for insurance purposes is a big deal, especially when there are medical bills involved. I gave them all of Karen's information and explained the situation. A few weeks later, I got a call from her ex-boyfriend, the same guy I'd asked her not to bring to my house. Turns out, he really was sweet, and he wanted to apologize for the awkward situation with staying over. He told me he had no idea she hadn't cleared his visits with me. He said she had told him I was fine with him staying there. I explained that she had told me he was some kind of abusive monster she was running from. He seemed shocked and said that wasn't true at all. They had just had different ideas about their future, and the breakup was mutual. He mentioned he had actually been trying to get more custody time with their son. The truth came out. Karen had been lying to both of us, playing us against each other. But then he told me something that made my whole week. He mentioned that Karen had asked him to tell me she was sorry about the insurance thing. She had gotten hit with a $28,000 fine for fraud. Apparently, she'd gone ahead and used my address anyway, even after I said no. I almost dropped the phone. $28,000. For someone who was supposedly struggling financially, that was going to be devastating. He went on to tell me that she had been calling everyone she knew trying to borrow money to pay it off. Nobody wanted to help her because word had gotten around about how she treated me. Karen's ex-boyfriend and I ended up becoming friends through all of this. He's a genuinely good guy who was trying to do right by his son, and Karen had been poisoning that relationship with her lies. He's been getting more custody time now that the truth came out about her character. Karen was working 3 jobs trying to pay off that fine and had to move back in with her parents. Her son is doing much better now that he's spending more time with his father, and even her dog found a better home with Karen's sister.